There must be some mistake, ma'am. This table is reserved for our VIP guests, Haley Brooks said, her smile tight, her eyes darting toward the white couple behind Danielle Rivers. The words didn't land gently. They cracked through the room like a glass breaking against stone. Danielle blinked once, then twice. She wasn't confused. She was calculating. She had heard variations of that sentence her whole life. Sometimes it was the bank manager saying the loan wasn't available. Sometimes it was a professor explaining why she didn't quite fit the graduate program, but tonight it came with white linen napkins, a $600 wine pairing, and a dining room full of stairs. She looked down at the email on her phone. Confirmation for Table 1, IMS Danielle Rivers. 7:30 p.m., Prestige, Dining, Manhattan. No mistake, I have a reservation, Danielle replied calmly, lifting her phone. Her voice was even, but her posture held steel. Under Rivers. Danielle Rivers. Haley didn't look at the screen. Her gaze had already drifted to Margot Whitfield, standing behind Danielle, swathed in pearls and entitlement, clutching a crocodile skin clutch, like it held more weight than the truth. I'm sure you do, Haley said, voice softening in mock sympathy. But this particular table has been set aside. Miss Whitfield always dines here. I can get you something near the kitchen. It's quite nice as well. Danielle didn't flinch, but something behind her eyes shifted like glass frosting in the cold. She slowly lowered her phone. Margot exhaled through her nose like someone trying not to smirk. Honestly, this is getting exhausting, she said, her voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Every time I come here, someone's in my spot. It's not complicated. People need to understand the rules. Haley nodded quickly. Of course, we're handling it. Danielle studied them both. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't curse. She didn't cry. She simply stepped back, her expression unreadable. For 13 long seconds, no one moved. That's when Jasmine Tran, seated 2 tables over, lifted her phone and pressed record, because something in the room had turned. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way other diners pretended not to watch while shifting in their seats. Or maybe it was the chill in Danielle's final words before she turned to leave. This restaurant, she said quietly, has just made the most expensive mistake of its existence. Margot chuckled, assuming the black woman in the navy silk suit was bluffing. Haley stood frozen, not understanding. Only Jasmine caught the flicker in Danielle's eyes, an edge of power she didn't yet recognize. What no one knew in that moment was, this Danielle Rivers wasn't just any guest. She wasn't just another black woman turned away at the velvet rope. She was the founder of the very technology that Prestige Dining had been courting for 6 months. She was the person who controlled the largest stake in the group's future AI-driven guest experience initiative. She was, in fact, the woman who could shut the lights off, and she was already calling her COO. What would you have done in Danielle's shoes? Have you ever been dismissed, looked over, or quietly pushed aside? Drop your story in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where justice finds its voice. Danielle Rivers was born on the south side of Chicago in a neighborhood where sirens were more common than silence, and ambition was often smothered before it had the chance to take a breath. Her mother, a hospital janitor, worked night shifts to keep the lights on. Her father had disappeared before she turned 5, but even then Danielle showed signs of someone who didn't intend to stay small. At 12, she found a discarded Dell laptop in a junk pile behind the church. It barely powered on, no internet. The screen flickered like an old light bulb, but she cleaned it, nursed it to life, and taught herself how to code using outdated manuals from the school library. While other kids played outside, Danielle was building simple programs, fixing bugs by trial and error, and dreaming of a world that didn't see her skin before her skill. By the time she reached high school, Danielle was tutoring her teachers in basic computer logic. She won a citywide tech competition at 17 with an algorithm that identified biased language and customer service scripts, a seed of what would later become her life's work. She went on to attend MIT on a full scholarship. But even there, surrounded by the brightest minds, the looks didn't stop. The whispered doubts. The professor who said, "You're good. Maybe too good. You sure this is your idea?" She didn't argue. She just built. After graduation, she turned down offers from the biggest names in Silicon Valley. She didn't want to sit in someone else's company. She wanted to build her own. And she did. At 29, she founded Nuvana Systems, a tech firm focused on using AI to eliminate bias in corporate environments, hiring customer support performance evaluations. Within 10 years, Nuvana had become a $2,007 billion powerhouse. But Danielle never stopped remembering where she came from. She still took the subway when she visited Chicago, still donated anonymously to tech labs in underserved schools, and still sent birthday flowers to her mother's old coworkers at the hospital. She had endured so much quiet racism in boardrooms, backhanded compliments from investors, being mistaken for someone's assistant more times than she could count. But she never let it break her. What kept her steady wasn't rage, it was resolve. So when that hostess looked her in the eye and tried to erase her, she didn't react out of anger. She responded out of memory, of every door that was slammed in her face, of every room she had to kick her way into, and of every little girl watching, waiting to see if success could really protect you from being dismissed. Danielle knew that some battles aren't fought with volume, they're fought with position. With timing, with power you don't announce until it's too late. Because she didn't just build a company, she built leverage. What fuels you to keep going, even when the world tells you to stop? Share your story in the comments. Prestige. Dining wasn't just a restaurant, it was a symbol. Nestled on the corner of Madison and 57th in the heart of Manhattan's luxury district, the flagship location of the Prestige Dining Group was where power dressed for dinner chandeliers imported from Italy, hand-stitched leather booths, and a guest list that included senators, fashion moguls, and billionaires. Getting a table wasn't about money, it was about status. On the surface, Prestige was flawless. Polished service, exquisite plating, and an unspoken promise. This was where you belonged, if you mattered. But beneath the surface, something uglier had long taken root. The company's marketing boasted exclusive inclusivity, but the culture told another story. Waitstaff quietly referred to black patrons as walk-ins, even when they had confirmed reservations. Latino families were often seated near the kitchen, far from the city views that white diners paid to enjoy. Asian guests were politely over-explained the wine list as if unfamiliar with fine taste. It wasn't loud, it wasn't obvious. It was something more dangerous, subtle, polished, and practiced. The rot had started years ago, but had been fertilized by people like Dean Sutter, the senior floor manager, a man who knew the names of every hedge fund client but couldn't be bothered to learn those of his Filipino dishwashers. Dean believed in managing optics. That meant ensuring familiar faces sat at the front tables while unfamiliar ones were gently redirected elsewhere. He had trained Haley Brooks, the young hostess, to recognize those faces. Not by ID, not by title, but by skin tone, wardrobe posture. She was good at it. Too good. And she quickly learned that some faces brought trouble. Trouble in the form of guests who overreact. Guests who record guests who file complaints. Most of them weren't white. Then there was Loretta Vance, the regional director and longtime executive at Prestige Dining Group. She didn't give direct orders to discriminate. She never said, "Keep the black guests in the back," but she didn't have to. Her silences were commands. When a donor's niece complained that a loud table made her uncomfortable, Loretta had the guests moved without asking. When an intern suggested adding Juneteenth specials to the seasonal menu, Loretta replied, "That's not really our clientele, is it?" Prestige had built its empire on appearances. But behind the Art Deco lighting and Michelin stars, it ran on favoritism, backdoor deals, and an unwritten caste system. The irony, they were preparing to modernize. 6 months before the incident with Danielle Rivers, the board of Prestige Dining had begun vetting a series of tech firms to overhaul their customer data systems. The goal was to streamline reservations, personalize service, and most importantly, reduce complaints. The executive committee wanted cutting-edge solutions that felt invisible, flawless predictive. What they didn't know, what Loretta Vance herself didn't know, was that the finalist in their procurement shortlist was Nuvana Systems, the very company Danielle Rivers had founded. A company whose entire mission was built on eliminating systemic bias in guest experiences. Danielle hadn't pushed for the contract. It had come through routine sales channels. A project manager at Nuvana had handled most of the talks. Danielle only got involved weeks later after seeing a draft proposal cross her desk. She had raised one eyebrow, Prestige Dining. She knew the name and she knew their reputation, but she didn't pull out. She watched quietly, observing their values, testing the gaps in their pitch. Prestige, for its part, had no idea who she was. Like many old-world corporations, they rarely researched who stood behind the companies they partnered with, especially when those companies were led by black women. Their vetting systems were about performance reports, not personal stories. And so, as fate would have it, while Prestige rolled out a VIP campaign boasting a new era of fairness, their front-of-house staff was still being rewarded for keeping the clientele familiar. Comfortable and white Haley, like many entry-level staff operated under pressure, tips meant survival. Karen Whitfield was a regular who tipped in $100 bills. She arrived in chauffeur-driven cars, wore Chanel, and expected her regular table regardless of the booking system. Haley had never dared challenge that. So when Danielle Rivers arrived that evening, confident, composed, and dressed in subtle elegance, Haley didn't see a tech mogul. She saw a problem. And when Karen's eyes narrowed, Haley fell into old training: protect the regulars, preserve the image. Dean Sutter reinforced that instinct with a subtle nod from across the room and Loretta. She wasn't there in person, but her influence hovered like perfume. No one could name, but everyone could smell. This was the foundation. Danielle had walked into an empire built on selective service, fear-driven decisions, and coded behavior that had gone unchecked for too long. What they didn't realize was that their next contract meeting was scheduled just 5 days away. And this time, Danielle wouldn't be silent in the background. Have you ever walked into a place and felt invisible, like no one saw your worth? Tell us about it in the comments. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. This table is spoken for. Haley Brooks said it again, firmer this time. Her voice trembled just slightly, betraying nerves behind the practiced smile. The words echoed with an edge of finality, like a quiet gavel falling in a courtroom that never gave Danielle Rivers a chance. Danielle didn't move. She stood at the side of table 1, round white-clothed, framed by flickering candlelight and an unobstructed view of Fifth Avenue's glimmering skyline. It was her assigned table. She had the confirmation. She had arrived exactly on time, and yet she stood there like an intruder. "I've already shown you my reservation," Danielle said again, her voice still calm but colder now. "Rivers Danielle. Booked through your in-house concierge 2 weeks ago." Behind her, Margot Whitfield sighed audibly, arms crossed, shifting her weight with theatrical impatience. "I'm going to be late for my meeting," she said to no one in particular, but loud enough to draw attention from nearby diners. Danielle turned slightly. Her gaze met Margot's. "That's unfortunate." Danielle said her words quiet, but razor-sharp. "Because I was on time for my table, the one you seem to believe belongs to you." Margot's mouth curled. "Oh, please, everyone knows this is my usual seat. I come here every Thursday. Ask anyone." Haley took a breath, then stepped in again. "Miss Rivers, I understand the confusion, but if you'd let me seat you at a comparable table in the rear—" "No," Danielle interrupted. "I didn't book comparable. I booked this table. I arrived on time. I presented my ID and my confirmation. The only thing that changed is that she tilted her head toward Margot, "doesn't think I belong here." By now, whispers were circulating. Forks paused mid-air. Eyes flicked from face to face. Jasmine Tran, 2 tables away, slowly angled her phone under her napkin and hit record. From the corner of the room, Dean Sutter approached with the kind of smile that had been used for decades to smooth over institutional insult. "Ladies," he began, clasping his hands, "I'm sure we can resolve this quickly. Ms. Rivers, perhaps we can upgrade you to a private lounge table. Complimentary champagne." "Of course I don't drink," Danielle replied flatly. "Well," he said, still smiling, then a premium appetizer on the house. "Truly, we didn't anticipate this overlap." Danielle leaned forward slightly. "Let me ask you something. Mr. Sutter. Dean Sutter. Mr. Sutter. When was the last time you asked Ms. Whitfield to move from this table?" Dean hesitated. Margot laughed softly. "He never has to, because I'm the one who's always booked it." Danielle locked eyes with Dean again. "So she arrives without a reservation and assumes this table is hers. And rather than follow your system, you remove the person who actually followed the rules. That's your policy." Dean's smile faltered. "There's no need to escalate." "I'm not escalating." Danielle said, "I'm clarifying." That was when Margot stepped closer. Her voice dropped, but her words cut through the air. "Look, I don't know who you are, and frankly, I don't care. But people like me—" Danielle raised an eyebrow. "People like you?" "Yes," Margot snapped. "People who helped build this city, who support establishments like this. We have earned a certain courtesy. You can't just walk in and claim it." Silence. Even Haley looked down. Danielle's next words were like a pin dropping in a room full of crystal. "I built the software your reservation system runs on." Margot blinked. Dean furrowed his brow. Danielle pulled out her phone again, not to show her reservation, but to open her email and scroll briefly before turning the screen toward Dean. It was a contract draft. Top left corner, Nuvana Systems X Prestige. Dining group subject line, AI integration proposal. Pending final approval. Client contact, Loretta Vance. "Maybe this rings a bell," Danielle said softly. Dean's face went still. Haley looked from Danielle to the screen, then to Dean, searching his expression for direction. Margot scoffed. "You're bluffing. Anyone can make a fake email." "Try Googling my name," Danielle said. "It won't take more than 30 seconds. Dean didn't move. His face drained of color, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. A moment later, a voice came from behind, clipped cold. "What seems to be the problem here?" Everyone turned. Loretta Vance stood just inside the dining room's private corridor. She had arrived unexpectedly for a board dinner, but had noticed the commotion. Dean exhaled with relief. "Loretta, thank God we've had a seating conflict, a double booking. Ms. Rivers here insists. She has a confirmed reservation," Jasmine Tran said loudly from her table, holding up her phone. "You're trying to remove her for that woman who walked in late." Loretta's eyes flicked to Jasmine, then to the phone, then to Danielle. "Ms. Rivers," Loretta said, cool and composed. "Let's speak privately, shall we?" "No," Danielle said. "We'll speak right here." A murmur went through the room. "Security is available if needed." Loretta said she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. It was a warning in perfume and pearls. Danielle stared at her. "So that's it. You're ejecting me for following your own rules. In public with witnesses. You're disrupting the experience for our other guests," Loretta said, gesturing toward Margot, who gave a smug half-smile. Danielle took a breath, then pulled out her phone again. "I'm documenting this," she said. "Every word you can't," Dean started. Danielle cut in. "And I am," and she pressed record. The room was utterly still. The clinking had stopped. Even the jazz from the speakers seemed to fade. Jasmine's phone kept rolling. A couple at a neighboring table whispered, "Is that the Nuvana CEO?" Loretta's lip twitched, but she didn't back down. "Miss Rivers, I'm asking you to leave now, or I'll call building security." Danielle didn't resist. She didn't raise her voice. She simply tapped a button on her phone and slid it into her coat pocket. Then slowly she picked up her clutch, adjusted her sleeves, and turned to face the room. This is what systemic bias looks like. She said to no one and everyone. It's not loud, it's not violent, it's polite, dismissive, and it hides behind policies designed to be manipulated. Then she walked toward the exit. As she passed Jasmine's table, she paused. "Keep the footage," she said quietly. "You might want it." Jasmine nodded. Margot exhaled triumphant. Dean turned away. Haley stared at the floor. But Loretta stood frozen, suddenly uncertain. Something in Danielle's tone didn't feel like defeat. It felt like warning. Outside, the night air was sharp. Danielle stepped onto the sidewalk, lifted her phone, and tapped her call history. Anthony Cross picked up on the second ring. "You ready?" he asked. "Start the clock," Danielle said. 13 minutes. Would you have stayed silent, or would you have recorded too? Drop your thoughts below. It took 4 minutes for the video to hit Twitter. Jasmine Tran uploaded a 47-second clip with the caption, "Black female CEO denied her table at Prestige, while a white walk-in is seated instead. She had the reservation, they called security, hashtag Danielle Rivers, hashtag dining while black." By minute 5, it was retweeted by a former senator. By minute 8, it was featured on 3 major tech blogs. By minute 13, the exact time Danielle had promised Anthony, the story was everywhere. In a single evening, Prestige. Dining Group's polished reputation began to crack like antique glass under a hammer. The video showed everything clearly. Danielle's calm explanations, the visible reservation, Margot Whitfield's smugness, Haley's discomfort, Dean's vague threats, Loretta's final blow, "Leave, or I'll call security." The footage wasn't angry. It wasn't edited, it was quiet, professional, devastating. By 9:45 p.m., it had over 2 million views on TikTok. By 10:12 p.m., Danielle Rivers was trending hashtag 2 on X, formerly Twitter. By midnight, hashtag Prestige. Shame had passed 6.3 million mentions across platforms. Celebrities began weighing in. A-list actress Naomi Lennox reposted the video with, "You humiliated a woman who built the system you're using. This isn't just racist, it's idiotic." Tech billionaire Avery Stone tweeted, "I've dined at Prestige for years. After tonight, I won't set foot in that place again. Anuvana Systems deserves better." On the investor side, things moved just as quickly. At 6:45 a.m. the next morning, stock in Prestige Dining Group holdings dropped 14% by 9:03 a.m. It had lost $418 million in market cap. Analysts on CNBC said it was a reputational wildfire. Inside Prestige HQ, panic set in. Loretta Vance arrived at the Manhattan corporate office looking like she hadn't slept. Her assistant had already printed dozens of tweets and headlines. Dean Sutter was nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled that he had called in sick. Haley Brooks was crying in the staff break room. The HR director, Michelle Arnold, summoned everyone to an emergency meeting. On screen, the full footage. Paused at the moment, Danielle said, "This is what systemic bias looks like." Then came the fallout. First to go, Dean Sutter. Terminated effective immediately. No severance, no PR statement. Next, Haley Brooks. Suspended without pay, pending investigation. She offered a tearful apology through HR. "I didn't mean to discriminate. I was following what I thought was policy, but the internet wasn't moved." Screenshots of her LinkedIn began to circulate. So did her past posts, including one about valuing tradition in guest service, which many interpreted as coded language. Third, Loretta Vance. This was the shock. For years, Loretta had been untouchable. She was known as the fixer inside the company, the one who smoothed over complaints, managed donor relations, and ensured everything appeared perfect on paper. But this time the paper trail led straight to her. She had been the one who made the final call to remove Danielle. She had tried to spin it as protecting the environment, but emails surfaced forwarded anonymously showing she had personally approved VIP override privileges for Margot Whitfield. By 2 p.m., Prestige Dining Group issued a press release. "We are deeply sorry for the unacceptable incident involving Ms. Danielle Rivers. Effective immediately, Loretta Vance will step down as executive director. We are reviewing all internal policies to ensure equity and accountability at every level of service." But the press release wasn't enough. In fact, it made things worse, because Danielle hadn't spoken publicly. She hadn't tweeted, hadn't posted, hadn't done a single interview, and the silence was deafening. People began wondering, what was she planning? What would she say? Would she sue? Would she speak at a conference? Was she about to go live behind the scenes? Danielle sat in her high-rise apartment in Tribeca, watching the storm unfold like a general studying the battlefield from a distance. She didn't smile, she didn't rage, she simply waited. Anthony Cross, her COO, called every 30 minutes with updates. By 3:45 p.m., 5 major hospitality chains had reached out to Nuvana Systems, requesting to open talks for Danielle's AI suite. By 4:15 p.m., a tech reporter leaked internal emails from Prestige's IT department, confirming they had been in the final stages of a $52 million contract with Nuvana, one now placed on indefinite hold. By 4:40 p.m., a second clip of Danielle walking out of Prestige, recorded by another guest, surfaced online with the caption, "She didn't shout. She didn't fight. She just owned them with her presence." That video surpassed 1 million views within 2 hours. Inside the walls of Prestige, Dining's PR team chaos reigned. Staff were fielding media calls non-stop. Angry customers were canceling reservations. Influencers were dropping partnerships. One luxury fashion brand quietly withdrew its monthly event contract. At 6:15 p.m., Danielle finally broke her silence with a single post on LinkedIn. "I wasn't surprised. I've seen this before in boardrooms, conferences, even coffee shops. The pattern is always the same. Dismiss, discredit, disappear. But I didn't disappear. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. Because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just waits, then acts." The post ended with one line: "I'll see you at the shareholder meeting." No hashtags, no photos, just her words. It was enough to ignite another firestorm. Dozens of business leaders reposted it with praise. Civil rights groups cited it in op-eds. One HR expert called it a masterclass in controlled response and leverage. And at Prestige Dining Group, the board finally understood. Danielle Rivers hadn't just embarrassed them. She had cornered them because in just 13 minutes, they had offended, removed, and dismissed the very woman they had been preparing to partner with at the highest level, and she hadn't needed to lift a finger in revenge. All she had done was tell the truth and let the world watch. Do you believe silence can be more powerful than shouting? When would you speak, and when would you wait? Share your answer below. The boardroom at Prestige. Dining Group's headquarters hadn't seen this much tension in years. Leather chairs gleamed beneath polished brass lighting, and the mahogany conference table, once a stage for champagne toasts and quarterly reports, was now quiet. 12 board members sat with hands folded, eyes lowered. The room smelled of fear masked by cologne. At exactly 9:00 a.m., the double doors opened. Danielle Rivers stepped in. She wasn't wearing designer armor, no flashy logos, no statement heels, just a simple gray tailored suit, soft blouse, and a notebook tucked beneath her arm. Power didn't need accessories today, it needed presence. Behind her walked Anthony Cross, COO of Nuvana. Systems calm and unreadable, he offered no greetings. He just nodded once at the board's legal counsel and took his seat beside Danielle. Loretta's chair was empty. "Let's begin," Danielle said, taking the head of the table, a place no one dared contest. The room remained still. "I've called this emergency shareholder meeting under full rights afforded by my equity stake," she continued. "As many of you now know, I own 25% of Prestige Dining Group's private voting shares. There was a stir. Some already knew. Others didn't. She let the weight of it settle. I acquired that position 3 years ago through my holding company quietly as part of an early diversification strategy. Until now, I have never exercised voting power. That changes today. Danielle opened her notebook and read, "On May 10th, I was publicly humiliated, denied service, despite a confirmed reservation, and removed from one of your flagship locations due to implicit and explicit racial bias." No one interrupted. She continued, voice steady. "I don't want an apology. I don't want compensation. I want change. Starting today." She turned to the board's chair, a gray-haired man named Charles Brenner who looked like he hadn't slept since the video went viral. "I'm submitting a formal motion to reorganize the company's executive leadership structure. This includes the permanent termination of Loretta Vance, the appointment of a chief equity officer reporting directly to the board, and mandatory anti-bias training implemented across all 29 properties." Charles cleared his throat, then said hoarsely, "Ms. Rivers, such motions require a review. I already consulted with counsel." She interrupted, Article 12. Section 4 of your operating agreement allows emergency motions if shareholder harm is demonstrated. Anthony slid a printed report across the table. Estimated revenue loss. Since the incident, $62 million, he said. Projected attrition of corporate clients if nothing changes. 31% employee resignation intent spiked by 22% in 2 days. The board chair leaned back. Defeated motion carried. Danielle said firmly, "Effective immediately." Then she stood. "I also want to address the staff directly." Within 2 hours, Danielle was at the flagship restaurant where it all began. This time, no one stopped her at the door. In the dining room, employees had gathered: servers, hosts, kitchen workers, cleaning staff. Danielle stepped to the center, not on a platform, but at eye level. "Some of you saw what happened," she said. "Some of you heard about it. But I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to tell you the system failed us all." Silence. Then one server, a young black man in his 20s, raised his hand. "Do you really own part of this place?" he asked. Danielle smiled. "Yes, and you're not shutting it down." "No," she said. "I'm building it back." "Right," she continued. "Bias doesn't only hurt the people it targets. It hurts the integrity of the work you do. It traps good people in bad habits. It rewards silence, and it hides behind luxury." She paused. "I'm launching an internal program starting today. It's called Reset. Every employee, from manager to dishwasher, will go through equity training. Not a slideshow, but immersive sessions led by facilitators who have lived experience. You'll be paid for your time, you'll be heard, and if you don't want to stay, you'll be offered placement assistance somewhere better." Some gasped. Danielle added, "We're also creating a mentorship pipeline. Front-of-house staff can train for corporate roles. Kitchen staff can apply for culinary scholarships. And for every person who's ever been made to feel small in this space, your voice matters now." Jasmine Tran, who had been invited as a guest observer, stood near the door, filming again. But this time Danielle knew, and she nodded, because this moment needed to be seen. That evening, Reset was announced publicly through prestigious social media platforms. The posts were simple: a black and white photo of Danielle standing in front of the staff, the caption reading, "When dignity is denied, equity must rise. Change begins now. Hashtag Reset with us." Within 24 hours, the company saw an unexpected shift. Former customers, especially black and minority patrons, returned. Not in huge numbers, but symbolically. Some came just to tip staff who'd spoken up. Others sent letters. A grandmother from Atlanta wrote, "I watched what they did to you, and I watched how you handled it. My granddaughter saw herself in you. Thank you for not walking away." Even critics who doubted corporate change were forced to admit this wasn't just a PR patch, it was a reconstruction. And Danielle didn't stop there. At Nuvana Systems, she began consulting with 3 other luxury restaurant groups to implement bias tracking software and anonymous guest feedback platforms. She pushed for data transparency, for employee equity councils, and for open reporting structures that protected whistleblowers. Meanwhile, Sarah Brooks, the young hostess who had asked Danielle to move, was given a chance to join the Reset program as a participant, not as a scapegoat. She accepted. In one of the workshops, she spoke with tears in her voice. I didn't think I had power, so I copied what I saw. But silence is power too. I used mine the wrong way. I want to change that. Danielle didn't forgive quickly, but she believed in structure, in repair, and in justice, not as vengeance, but as responsibility. How would you rebuild a system that once rejected you? What does justice look like when you're the one holding the keys? Let us know in the comments. 6 months later, the name Prestige Dining Group didn't conjure scandal anymore. It brought something rarer: respect. The company had rebuilt itself, not just with policies, but with purpose. The Reset initiative, led personally by Danielle Rivers for its first 90 days, had transformed into a permanent division Prestige Equity and Experience Department PED, the first of its kind in the fine dining industry. Each property now employed an internal equity advisor. Guest feedback wasn't just a formality, it was reviewed weekly by rotating employee panels. Menus included heritage spotlights from marginalized communities, hiring guidelines were rewritten from the ground up, and anonymous staff surveys revealed something surprising. Morale was the highest it had ever been, but the most meaningful transformation was personal. Danielle stood in the main dining room of the Manhattan flagship. Yes, the same room where it had all begun, and watched as 2 young women were seated at table 1. One was black. The other was Latina. Both wore lab coats under their winter jackets. They didn't glance around nervously. They knew they belonged, the host who had welcomed them. A young black man named Xavier, who started as a dishwasher but had risen through the mentorship program Danielle launched. He had trained under one of the city's best maitre d's. His posture was proud, his presence graceful. Danielle smiled. She didn't need to stay. Just watching was enough. As she turned to leave, she heard a soft voice behind her. Miss Rivers. It was Sarah Brooks. Her hair was shorter now, her posture less stiff, her tone unrecognizably humble. She wasn't in uniform, she held a training binder. I didn't expect to see you here. Sarah said, her voice steady but tentative. Danielle nodded once I came to check on table 1. Sarah followed her gaze, then looked down. I think about it every day, she said quietly. What I said, what I didn't say. I was scared of losing my job, but that doesn't excuse anything. Danielle looked her over, not with pity, not with disdain, just awareness. What have you done since she asked? Sarah exhaled. I joined the Reset program. Then I stayed. I asked to help teach it. I'm still learning, but I want to do better and help others do better too. Danielle let a silence hang in the air, then finally offered her hand. Then keep going. Sarah's eyes welled, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, holding Danielle's hand for 1 second longer than expected before stepping back into the training room. Elsewhere, the ripple spread wider. Dean Sutter. After weeks of silence, he issued a public apology and enrolled in a diversity leadership program. He didn't ask for forgiveness, he asked for instruction, and to his credit, he finished it and went on to work for a nonprofit advocating fair hiring in hospitality, Loretta Vance. She disappeared from the industry for a time, but months later, Danielle received a letter. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't polished PR. It was handwritten. It read, I've lived most of my career believing proximity to wealth justified all things. I see now what I refused to see then. If there's ever a way I can contribute to repair, I'll be quiet and I'll follow. Danielle never responded, but she kept the letter. Because some wounds don't require reopening, just remembrance. And what of Danielle herself? Nuvana systems flourished. But more importantly, Danielle shifted her role. She began mentoring women founders of color across tech finance and design. Her new foundation, the Rivers Initiative, granted seed funding to projects aiming to rebuild institutions from the inside out. She spoke only once about the incident at a keynote for the National Forum on Ethics in Business. I wasn't angry. They didn't know who I was. She said I was disappointed. They didn't care who anyone was. That's the root. That's the poison. If we judge worth by familiarity, we'll always protect injustice. She paused, then added, Justice isn't revenge. It's when the door stays open for the next person who walks through it. The crowd rose to its feet. Outside the Prestige flagship, a small bronze plaque was affixed near the entrance. It read, "In honor of Danielle Rivers," for reminding us that dignity doesn't ask to be served. It stands and demands a table built for all. What does dignity mean to you? Is it silence in the face of injustice, or the courage to return and change the system? Tell us in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe now for more true narratives of power, justice, and transformation.